Time is ticking for Middlesbrough to make a decision on Michael Carrick's future, with fans keen to understand what's going to be going on ahead of the new season. It's been almost 2 weeks since the end of Middlesbrough's campaign, where Middlesbrough fell painfully short of their aspirations of getting into the other playoff places. The season ended with Borough finishing in 10th position in the table, with Blackburn, Millwall and West Brom separating Middlesbrough from the top six, the positions that Middlesbrough were targeting throughout the campaign, and an area that Michael Carrick said that Middlesbrough would be targeting at the start of the other campaign. Now, for Middlesbrough, it's been a really frustrating campaign. It's been one where Middlesbrough have looked at times unplayable in certain matches. We've looked really, really good when things have been going really well for Michael Carrick's side. Things have been great. We've played good, entertaining football. We've been scoring a hat load of goals and we've been looking like the real deal. But those matches have been few and far between, with Middlesbrough really kind of struggling to get themselves over the line in a number of matches. We've thrown away needless points over the course of the campaign, and ultimately that's what's cost us in our pursuit of the top six. Now, Michael Carrick's future at the club is certainly in question with a number of supporters. A poll from the Evening Gazette was run on whether fans wanted Michael Carrick to stay at the club, and around about 70% of fans included in the poll said that they would prefer a new head coach to come in ahead of the new season. But with a review taking place on Michael Carrick's future and overall over the course of the season, it really kind of remains to be seen whether a change will be taking place or whether Middlesbrough fans will be looking forward to more of the same, I guess, going into the new campaign. So I think under Michael Carrick, it's been quite a difficult season. There's been a lot of different factors at play, some of them going in his favour, some of them going against him. But ultimately, the facts of the matter are that in Middlesbrough's 3 seasons with Michael Carrick in charge, Middlesbrough have gone backwards in terms of our points tally over those campaigns. There's no getting away from that. And Michael Carrick said earlier on this season that this was the strongest squad that he'd had in his time at Middlesbrough. So I think with that, with Michael Carrick being very, very happy with the squad of players that he had at his disposal, I think with the Championship being incredibly competitive this season. Yes, you had the top 3 sides in Leeds United, Burnley and Sheffield United who had parachute payments, but I think other than that, the league was absolutely wide open. It was completely laid on a plate for Middlesbrough to get into the top 6, given the poor calibre of the teams around us in the table. It was there very much for Middlesbrough to walk in to the top 6 places and earn a spot in the playoffs. Even going into the last game of the season, all Middlesbrough needed to do somehow was to get a victory over Coventry City to earn that place in the top 6. It was something which was quite hard to believe, really, considering how poor Middlesbrough have been. But that just shows how poor the rest of the Championship was, that Middlesbrough was still in this race for the playoffs going into the final day. But I don't think many supporters had much in the way of confidence going into that game at the CBS Arena. I don't think many expected Middlesbrough to be able to get the result that they needed. And lo and behold, Middlesbrough blew that opportunity. They lost the game 2-0. Coventry went into the playoffs, albeit they're now knocked out after being eliminated by Sunderland. But for Middlesbrough, it's really kind of a case of taking stock ahead of the new season. It's about kind of figuring out where the campaign went so wrong, what we need to do to improve going into the new campaign, and ultimately making any changes that need to be made in order to make sure that Middlesbrough do enjoy a better season next time round. So Michael Carrick's future is certainly going to be top of that agenda. You've got to think it's a huge talking point amongst Middlesbrough supporters, and there are arguments for and there's arguments against him staying in charge. I'll come on to my verdict in just a little bit, but just to go through some of the arguments. So the Carrick in argument. There's a lot of suggestions that Middlesbrough should be sticking with Michael Carrick. A lot of them do make quite a lot of sense. It's obviously he's had 3 seasons in charge. Middlesbrough don't want to be one of the clubs who are kind of hiring and firing managers willy-nilly whenever anything goes wrong. The whole process of bringing in Michael Carrick and bringing in Kieran Scott as head of football has been based around kind of building for the long term, not being reactive to short-term results and short-term disappointments, but making sure that Middlesbrough are building for the future. They're playing an attacking brand of football and really kind of building that kind of continuity with Michael Carrick at the helm. And that's been something that Middlesbrough have been keen to do. Even when results weren't going well, a couple of months ago, Steve Gibson came out and supported Michael Carrick and said that he was still the man that he was backing to take Middlesbrough forward to hopefully get into the playoffs this season. But he was still the man that he was hoping would be able to lead Middlesbrough moving forward. And it's hard to see if that will change. I think that's going to be one of the big decisions that Steve Gibson has to make. I think if Michael Carrick does leave the club, I think it will be with something of a heavy heart from Steve Gibson's point of view. I think it will be from a lot of supporters as well, who will be very sort of sad to see Carrick go, because I think everyone wanted things to work out under Carrick. But I think Carrick certainly hasn't had it easy this season. Some of the arguments in his favour have been the fact that Middlesbrough did effectively lose his best two players in the January transfer window. Emmanuel Latilath left the club to join Atlanta United in the MLS for a club record fee. It was always going to be really, really impossible to replace his goals and his work rate and his tenacity in attack. But ultimately, we did replace him with Kelechi Iheanacho, who was absolutely not fit for purpose, in my opinion. I'm sure there'll be another video about Middlesbrough's transfer activity and what we need to do moving into the summer coming up soon. But he was absolutely not the man to replace Latilath in terms of goals, in terms of output, but also in terms of his influence and work rate on the team. Middlesbrough also lost Ben Doak in January. There was a lot of transfer speculation suggesting that Liverpool were going to be willing to sell him in January. That didn't happen. He ended up staying with Middlesbrough, which was great news. But he did then end up picking up an injury not long after that, which ended his season. And Ben Doak was absolutely unplayable at times during the back end of 2024. Middlesbrough were winning games. We weren't great by any means, but Ben Doak was certainly the star of the show. He was really kind of provided that X factor. And so for Michael Carrick to lose two of his key players in 1 month was a real sort of bitter pill for him to swallow. Yes, Middlesbrough did go out into the transfer market and bring in replacements. They signed Morgan Whittaker, mentioned about Kelechi Iheanacho. We did bring in other players like Illing Jr. and Ryan Giles and Mark Travers in the January transfer window. It's not a case that Michael Carrick had his players sold and then they weren't replaced. They were very much replaced, but certainly it was still a really kind of big disappointment for Carrick to lose those players in January, and that was something which was a big obstacle to overcome in the second half of the season. It's not the first time that Carrick's lost some of his better players during his reign as well. You only have to look back to losing Chuba Akpom, for example, in his first season in charge. That campaign, Middlesbrough had the likes of Ryan Giles, and we had Cameron Archer, we had Chuba Akpom, who was at the club permanently, and all of those players left over the course of that summer. So Middlesbrough had to rebuild and go again. We signed Morgan Rogers, who went off to Aston Villa and has done wonderful things. He was another player who was really starting to come good with Middlesbrough before he was sold on. He moved on. We brought in Finn Azaz, who was a good player, but someone who kind of needed a little bit of work. It took a little bit of time to get him up to speed. The same with the likes of Latilath when they came in. Michael Carrick's had to kind of grind out victories at a time when these players were adapting to life in the Championship. They were trying to come good and fit into life at Middlesbrough. And then ultimately what's ended up happening is when these players have come good, they've ended up being sold on. So that's been really difficult for Michael Carrick to deal with. It is part of the business model. I think it's something which is the same for a lot of managers. In the Championship, I think it's just the way that things are, that if a player's too good, I guess, for the Championship, or if someone's really excelling in the second tier, then the likelihood is that they are going to move on, whether it's to the Premier League or to one of the top elite leagues around Europe. And that's certainly what's happened with Michael Carrick this season with Emmanuel Latilath. So there is an argument to say that I guess that the rug was sort of pulled out from underneath him, but I'm not really buying into that too much, because we did sign replacements. By all accounts, some of the players who were brought in were directly requested by Michael Carrick, so I don't think it would be fair to say that he wasn't backed in the transfer market. A lot of the players did come at his request, and so it was still very much a case that Middlesbrough ended the season with a squad that was Michael Carrick's squad, effectively. We lost Matt Clark in January as well. Michael Carrick famously came out at his press conference when we only had 3 central defenders and said, "No, I think we'll be all right." Only to lose Luke Ayling and George Edmondson and Dale Fry to injury not long after as well. So I think that caveat of losing his best player in January is a justification to a certain degree. But then I think other than that, I think it was just really kind of a disappointing season. I think the flip side of the argument For those who are wanting Michael Carrick out of the club, it's just simply that things haven't been good enough. As I mentioned earlier on in the video, it's been 3 seasons of regression under Carrick. Our points tally has gone down every single season. This season, it was wide open. It was laid on a plate for Middlesbrough to get into the playoffs. He said by his own admission, it was the best squad that he'd worked with at Middlesbrough. It was also, in my opinion, the weakest championship that there's been in a number of seasons. So it was there on a plate for Middlesbrough to at least get into the top 6, but that wasn't able to be done. And I think a large part of that does have to come down to Carrick and his coaching team. As I said, when Middlesbrough play well, we play very well. We play good attacking football. We certainly did in the first half of the season, but we don't really seem to have a plan B. There's no real kind of fluidity or variation in the way that Michael Carrick sets his teams up. He does kind of struggle to, I guess, to adapt to the fixture that's in front of him. If another team throws him a curveball, he seems to struggle with how to handle that. In the second half of games, Michael Carrick's always a little bit reluctant to make substitutions as well. You often find that the other team have made 3-4 substitutions before Michael Carrick's made 1 or 2, which just in a really simple physical sense is putting Middlesbrough at a disadvantage, because it means that the other team have got fresh legs on the pitch and Middlesbrough are struggling. And that sort of, I don't know whether you'd call it stubbornness or, I guess, lack of ideas or whatever it might sort of be. Those kind of decisions, they do add up and they have proven costly. There's been a lot of times this season when things just haven't been working out for Middlesbrough from a tactical point of view, and Michael Carrick's just seemed reluctant to change it, even in the course of a match when there's ebbs and flows in matches, and momentum is a massive part of fixtures, particularly in the Championship, where each team generally has an opportunity or a spell where they're putting the other team under pressure. And Michael Carrick's team haven't really, I guess, figured out how to quell that pressure. We're still kind of relying on our players playing out from the back, keeping hold of the ball and trying to remain composed. But sometimes what you need to do is you just need to put your foot through it and get rid of it. You just have to look to the game at Preston away when that awful defensive, I've heard it called a sort of Benny Hill style mix up at the back between I think it was Luke Ayling and Aidan Morris. Ultimately proved costly. It meant that Reece was able to score for Preston, and that was a game when Middlesbrough fell short. You look at the Sheffield Wednesday game on Boxing Day when Middlesbrough were 3-0 up at half time. We ended up drawing the game 3-3, and they're just 2 games off the top of my head where Middlesbrough have thrown away points needlessly. And I think you do have to look at Michael Carrick's role in that and his inability to, I guess, to manage the game effectively to get Middlesbrough over the line. It's brilliant playing wonderful attacking football. Like I said, when Middlesbrough are good, and we've played good football this season, it's been very, very good. It's been very, very easy on the eye. And I really enjoy it when we are playing like that. But those matches have been few and far between. It's been really difficult for Middlesbrough to build a run of form. And I think that's been the main frustration this season, just how stop-start Middlesbrough's season has been. There's been a lot of sort of false dawns over the course of this campaign. A lot of times where Middlesbrough have had injuries, and then we've got a big result, and the feeling's been like, right, let's kick on from here and let's really kind of nail down that top that spot in the top 6, and it just hasn't happened. And I do think that Michael Carrick deserves a bit of criticism for that, because ultimately it's up to him to manage the team. It's up to him to manage these games and make sure that even if Middlesbrough aren't able to get victories, that they are able to get something from them. But the fact that we've lost so many games this season is a real reason why we've missed out on the top 6. I personally, I don't have any arguments with the fact that we finished 10th in the table. It's always an accurate reflection of what's going on, despite what Jonathan Woodgate would say. The table doesn't lie at all. We finished 10th in the table because we were the 10th best team over the course of the campaign. Despite the fact that I and many other Middlesbrough fans might think that Middlesbrough squad had the capability to finish higher at the start of the campaign, I thought that Middlesbrough should be capable really of finishing 4th or 5th in the Championship. That's where I thought Middlesbrough were capable of finishing, but the fact that we finished 10th is an accurate reflection of where we were over the course of the campaign. But I do think that Middlesbrough underperformed. I do think that Middlesbrough were capable of finishing higher, and my personal opinion is probably that with a different manager, with a different set of coaches in the backroom team, we maybe could have got a little bit more out of this team this season and probably finished in the top 6 as a result. So I think it's really difficult to say what Middlesbrough need to be doing next. As I said, they are undergoing a sort of behind the scenes review as to what's happened this season, not just with Michael Carrick's future, but with everything in terms of player performances, the coaching team, injuries, all of that will be reviewed to make sure that Middlesbrough are in the best shape moving forward into the new season. But Carrick's future will certainly be top of that list. What I would say, my verdict on the whole situation is that something needs to change this summer. Last season wasn't good enough. The fact that we've been in regression for the last 3 seasons isn't good enough. In my opinion, we should be building for the future. Something certainly needs to change. From a recruitment point of view, January wasn't good enough, and that was really quite confusing, really, because I've generally been a fan of the recruitment that and the transfer business that Middlesbrough have done over the last few windows. Yes, it's included losing a few of our best players, but you can kind of see the business sense of buying low and then selling high, making a profit on these kind of players, and it has sort of made sense. But I do think that we came out of the January transfer window significantly weaker than what we went into it. I remember looking at the squad in November, December, and even though results weren't quite right, it felt like there was a really good balance to the team. There was good depth in every department. You sort of knew what you were going to be getting from the players all over the park. But since January, it just hasn't really worked out like that. There's been a lot of There's been a lot of players brought into the club who just haven't had any impact on the team whatsoever. Lone players like Ryan Giles, he's looked like a shell of the player who was at the club previously. Mark Travers, yep, he's been brilliant. Illing Jr., he warmed up during his time at the club. Iheanacho, he did very, very little during his loan spell, which was really disappointing considering he'll have cost a significant amount in wages and that sort of thing as well. Plus, with his reputation and his undoubted pedigree, we should have really been getting more from him than what we sort of got. Morgan Whittaker, he came in, and I think there's more to come from him, but he's been disappointing as well. I just sort of feel like recruitment is an area that we'll need to address going into the summer. I think in terms of Carrick's future himself, I'd probably be leaning towards getting a new boss in charge. I think that if there's a suitable option to come in and replace him, I think it's something that Middlesbrough should be considering. I don't think that Michael Carrick should leave at all costs. I don't think he's been that bad. I guess it's not a case that he needs to be sacked for Middlesbrough to move on. I think that what he's done is he's laid a lot of positive foundations. I guess really we have played some good football, and there are signs that I was going to say signs of improvement. There haven't really been signs of improvement, but I have enjoyed what he's sort of doing in terms of the continuity. It just hasn't really translated to results on the pitch. And I think if there is an option to upgrade on Michael Carrick, I think Middlesbrough should take it. I know that Steve Cooper was linked with the job a couple of months ago. I'm not sure how true that was or how likely that was to happen, but that was a potential option. Rob Edwards, obviously he's out of work at the moment, and I know things didn't end well for him at Luton, but it was between him and Michael Carrick to get the job at Middlesbrough in the first place, so potentially he'd be an option. But I think for me it would need to be an upgrade on Carrick for us to consider it. I don't think we should be getting rid of him at all costs. I do think that if we were to replace him, it would need to be with someone who was coming in with a little bit more tactical acumen, someone who was able to manage games a little bit better. But ultimately, I don't think it's all down to Carrick. I do think the backroom team need to take a little bit of responsibility. I wouldn't be against, for example, Michael Carrick staying in charge, but Middlesbrough bringing in more of an experienced coach in the background. At the moment, we've got Jonathan Woodgate and Grant Leadbitter and Graham Carrick as his main coaches. And obviously, we lost Aaron Danks, who went to Bayern Munich to work under Vincent Kompany. But I don't know if Middlesbrough could bring in a sort of a Mike Phelan-esque sort of experienced coach, someone who can come in and be number two to Michael Carrick, an experienced head who's sort of been there and done it and offer a different opinion. I think that could be really beneficial, but I think ultimately something does need to change this summer. We can't go into the new season with the same setup as we've got at the moment. It's that's what they say, isn't it? It's the definition of insanity to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. I think if we did go into next season with the same coaching team and with Michael Carrick in charge. Yes, there'll be positive games. There'll be matches where we, I'm sure, would beat teams 3-0 or 4-0 or potentially 5, depending on the players that we've got. But we would also be losing a lot of sloppy points over the course of the campaign. And ultimately, we'd probably land in the same sort of area as the table, same sort of area of the table, as what we did this season, in that kind of 6th to 10th sort of area. So I do think that something needs to change. For me, it's encouraging that Middlesbrough are having a detailed review of what's going on at the club to make sure that we are in the best shape moving forward. But time is ticking, as the video title says. I do think Middlesbrough do need to make a decision, and they do need to make a decision quickly. I know it's only mid-May at the moment, but the new season does roll around quickly. Plans need to be put in place for pre-season. Whoever the head coach is next season, whether it's Michael Carrick or someone else, they need to be working closely with Kieran Scott now to make sure that we're identifying the right targets. But also, if Middlesbrough are looking for a new boss, then it's really important to be in the marketplace for the best candidates on the market as well. A lot of other clubs in the Championship are making changes as well. Watford have just hired a new boss. Norwich are looking for a new boss. There's a number of others who are going to be doing the same. And for Middlesbrough, they need to be in the race to get these top-end managers as well. They don't want to be in a situation where every other club has snapped up the talented bosses that are available, and then Middlesbrough are sort of left with sloppy seconds. Because, as I said, if we were to get rid of Carrick, I do think it would need to be someone who was an upgrade on him. Otherwise, it's just not worth doing, in my opinion. So Middlesbrough do need to make a decision quickly. Yes, it needs to be a thorough decision. It needs to be thought through. The whole idea that was laid out in the reports by the Northern Echo and Teesside Live was that they don't want to make an emotional, I think, knee-jerk decision was the quote that was used, which completely makes sense. You don't want to be going into it with emotions running high after missing out on the playoffs. You do want to take a little bit of time to really kind of take stock and decide what needs to be done moving forward. But I do think that Middlesbrough do need to make a decision fairly quickly, just so that fans know what's going on ahead of the new season, so that players know what's going on, and ultimately so that plans can be put in place to make sure that Middlesbrough are in as good a position as possible going into the new campaign. So that's what I think. I do think that a change needs to happen. I do think that Michael Carrick's future is vulnerable, and for me, probably him moving on would be the best option. But ultimately, it needs to be the right person who would come in to replace him. So that's what I think. I'd like to know what you think as well. So please drop into the comments below. Let me know what you think about Michael Carrick's future and whether you would be replacing him as manager. If you were replacing him, who would you like to see in charge? That's going to be a really exciting one as well if Middlesbrough do make a change, to see who would come in to replace him and whether he would be a suitable upgrade. So drop into the comments below. Let me know what you think. And if you have enjoyed this video, please do hit like. Please do hit subscribe as well, because your support is very much appreciated. And I will catch up with you next time.